Welcome to the Rhythms of Focus podcast for wandering minds who are tired of feeling that they have to force themselves to make things happen. Maybe know that when things line up well, that tendency to wander actually becomes a powerful wave of focus. I'm Dr. Kourosh Dini, fellow wandering mind. It wasn't that long ago that I struggled to make things happen, whether it was to remember when to pay a bill, do things over time, or look at a list without feeling repulsed. Fast forward through years of study and practice, I can now not only deal with the world, I can be creative, playful, and engage in the ways that make sense to me. I can be a doctor, musician, father, still play games in the evenings. I've created this podcast to share these ideas so you can do the same, hopefully with a lot less of the troubles I needed to go through to get here. Whether you have ADHD, deal with anxiety, or just suffer from a powerfully creative spirit, I invite you to join me in this weekly podcast to start finding your own way to a calmer, more intuitive space. Please note, I'm not functioning as your doctor, psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, therapist, or otherwise. This is here for education, if not entertainment, and I do hope you enjoy it. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Rhythms of Focus here. I've got another excellent treat for you. I've got my friend and colleague, Matt Strieby of New Leaf Design. Matt is a guy who, for me, has made the magic. You know, whenever I'm working on a project, I'm sitting there, I think of it, I've got an idea, it's bubbling up, and maybe I throw some ideas here and there, and eventually there's like something there. I'm working on a thing. It's in my engaged list. I'm there. But when I get Matt involved, when I'm like, okay, I got to reach out to this guy. I put this task on my list to email him, and I'm like, okay, am I ready? Yeah, okay, yeah, I've got it. I've got one. Okay, fine. Somehow, some magical spark happens that, it just comes alive. It becomes a thing, a real thing. Whether, when we first started working together in 2005 with my music album, Ontogeny. This is a synth album. This is raw. This is just primal in my mind of like what it is. And I came to him like, okay, I found his name, I think through a book that I'd had on, maybe we can talk about that when I bring him on here. I started working on this, and he came up with the album, how the CD jacket would look and everything. And it's just like, wow, this works. And every project thereafter, whether it's been about my books or courses and et cetera, like if I want it to come alive, Matt's the guy. So anyway, I'm thrilled to have Matt here where we can talk about, I think one of the things is, for a wandering mind, the idea of play, among other things, but play can be a powerhouse for those with ADHD, wandering minds, all the, the neurodivergent, a range of folks, where you have to figure out, what do I do with this? Because it can be so powerful. It can overwhelm us. It can throw us into hyperfocus. It can have us scattered. And then we still got to earn a living, and we still got to do things. And anyway, when you're being creative, what do you do? So anyway, Matt, welcome. Thanks for being here on the show.
Hi. Yeah, it's great to be here. I really appreciate you doing this. Wow, the things you said about me. I mean, I really appreciate that. I'd have loved working with you over these past 21 years. I find that you have a very interesting approach to your own artistic pursuits. And you definitely are a kind of a think outside the box kind of person. I hate using that term, but it's true. I mean, but I do appreciate being here. And yeah, let's talk about like the process of being creative. That's kind of what I'm all about. I have to, like you were saying, the wandering mind, it's easy to let ideas overwhelm you, but you also need to have that space where you can explore those ideas too. So I think for me, it's a matter of like putting a structure on it that doesn't overwhelm or stifle it, but allows me to move forward in a kind of a semi-structured way, but it allows room for play and creativity at the same time.
I mean, that is so core. I mean, the idea of a structure itself, I think that's one of the things that we can just rebel against. Like,
yes,
I don't
absolutely.
Want that, but then at the same time, there's a need for it in order to carry something forward.
Yeah, being an artistic person, that's where the key is, finding that sweet spot, where you have to let your ideas take you where they will. But if they're starting to pull you in the wrong direction, you've got to be able to recognize that and learn how to rein it in. So I have kind of come up with my own process of, working through, design issues, and it depends on the customer too. Some people want more structure. So it's kind of unique for me. Whereas, there's this romantic notion of, the artist, ooh, this free spirit, you can do whatever they want and, throw a million things up against the wall and see what sticks. And that's great if you don't have a deadline. But as a creative professional, I have deadlines. I have to meet, usually I might other people, but, hey, sometimes things could be overwhelming. So you have to at least have a way to channel all of that stuff and move it forward and advance to your final product. At the same time, not letting that structure and everything that you're using to channel it, like, kill it. And that is probably the hardest part about this job.
Something that, I mean, I'm imagining that you started developing this process for yourself like early on.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, long before I met you. I mean, It was interesting when I did meet you and we started working together, and I sensed that you were like, there's something different about this guy. He's really thinking a lot about process, and we artists, we think about process too, maybe in a little different ways, but process is so important. Yeah. And I really picked that up with you. It's like, this guy thinks about process and how do we go from A to B, but not in a, rigid way. And so, yeah, I started to realize after seeing some of the things that you were thinking about, especially when we started working with Waves of Focus, wow, he's got some really cool ideas and I'm already doing some of this stuff. That was the interesting thing. It's like, I realized what you were doing is you were giving me names for it. So, part of my process, especially at the beginning, when you have the blank canvas, it's like, oh my gosh, it's terrifying. And if the customer that I have doesn't have a concrete idea of what they want, then it really literally is a blank canvas. So, yeah, I had to kind of come up with a process to get that all started. But like you were saying, some of the things that you were talking about really resonated with me. And so I started naming my process more. And, I can explain more about that. You have a question?
No, please. I think let's dive right into it, please.
Yeah.
So I think so many people want to know, what is that creative process? Because it's so it can be so elusive. And
it is.
And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, what you've adapted, because I think also, while I've been able to name some things here and there and all that, I think it's not until it really has your own voice that anything really takes shape.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say, when you said everybody, there's a creative process, it's different for everybody, obviously. I mean, I am an individual. I do things a certain way. I have quirks and habits like anybody else. And being an artistic person, I do tend to have a bit more of a wandering mind. And I think that's very beneficial. And I think a lot of creative types do have that wandering mind a little bit to various degrees. My best friend, he has very much a wandering mind. And I've talked to him about some of these concepts. But yeah, I think for me, a lot of the things that you were talking about, like I said, really resonated with me. And then I started to kind of formally think about, okay, what is my process? I mean, I didn't really, I'd never had it written down or anything, but I started to really think about what it is. And, when confronted with that blank canvas, one of the first things I realized I was doing that allowed me to still be creative and free thinking, but still at least start the process, was this period of reflection and visualization. So let's use a concrete example. Your Ontogeny CD. I don't know how many people have seen that. The cover, I think it's been a while. Let's see. Does it have like an embryo or something on it? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So you came to me and you talked about the concept of ontogeny. Can you define that again real quick? Because I don't have a very good memory for dictionary definitions. But
sure. just the idea of the life process from birth through death, through conception through death.
Okay. Yeah. That's where the embryo came from. And so what I did is like thinking, okay, all right, how do we, so you told me that was the concept and hey, that's a cool concept. Like, what do you do visually for that? But that doesn't look like, you don't want like a baby and an old man, you don't want anything stereotypical. So here's where the creative part comes in. The first thing you do is like, okay, what are all the cliches? We're going to just shove those aside. We're not going to consider that. I had a photography teacher once. I remember he said, okay, you can go out. Here's your assignment. You're going to take color photos with slides. You can do anything you want except babies, dogs, sunsets, and old barns. Okay, so now my kind of subversive mind was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if I did a picture with all of those elements in it? That's a different story. But no, he had a good point. It's like, yeah, think in new ways. So when I had your idea, it's like, okay. And so I think I did a little more research into what that term meant and everything. And I came up with this weird idea of this. So this diagram, I think it's the O in ontogeny. Mm-hmm. And it had something to do with, see, this is how long it's been. Wasn't it something about, I had like a circle with like dots in it. And like one of them, there was 2 dots in each one. And then the last one only had 1 because it was something to do with aging. It's been so long. But anyway, like there was like, what is that with in cell biology? The telomeres, they keep getting shorter as you age.
That may well be the case.
Yeah, something like that. And that was like, okay, now how many people are going to pick up on this? Probably nobody, except if you like maybe are a cell biologist or something. But I like that as a visual. I thought it made it interesting to look at, even if people didn't pick up on it. Yeah. So that was so we had that embryo. So yeah, that was the beginning. And then the process was illustrated by that O in ontogeny. So again, I tried to like think creatively, like I went into it, I studied a little, I researched a little bit of cell biology and the aging process, and I came up with that idea for the cover. But you didn't have to understand any of that to just see that, just because the image was kind of interesting. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there it is. We reused that motif on the inside too. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that was also on the cover, was it not? That circle with the dots in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, of course, we did this collage, and this was a little more literal, but I think it worked really well because there was chemistry. I think some of those I can't remember what those actually meant something, those chemical models,
sure.
Formulas there. But yeah. And it had this nice linear look because I always, when somebody comes to me, especially if it's a musician and I'll tell people right now, I do not as much these days, but back then I did a lot of CD art, and that's how I got to know Kurosh. Yeah. So I was doing the CD and your musical style, and I always tried to listen to people's musical style. I didn't want something that didn't fit because there's a lot of variety, but there's still this undercurrent that, it's kind of precise. Even though you wander a lot, there's something that's holding it together kind of in a formal way. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do with that collage. So I really try to listen to what my customer, if they're a musician, what are they saying with their music? What do they try to do with their music? And then I try to translate that visually. And so, but that just didn't like fall together. It's like, it didn't like appear, oh, here's the solution. No, I did go through my process. And, the first part, the reflection and visualization, that was like thinking about, in the case of your album, what is aging? What is, the life cycle? What are the stages of life that we go through? And I represented it visually, literally with that circle diagram, from a biological standpoint, but also from a human standpoint. There's the collage of the different faces and people at different stages of their life. So it kind of covered both. And I like that when you have that kind of duality, when you can like express the same idea in different ways and integrate them visually. I really dig that. So, yeah.
So you had this idea of reflection and visualization that you formally, you've formalized that part of it. This idea that A lot of times I think we get caught up in this idea that you need to have a product in order to have anything have been done. It like nothing counts unless you have this thing.
Exactly. And that's why I think people are afraid to have these early stages. They want the solution immediately. We're trained in our society to want. We want instant answers. You want instant solutions. I need that by 5, like it doesn't always work that way. Now I have deadlines. I'm a commercial artist, but if I didn't have the visualization reflection part, it would be a disaster. Every solution I would come up with, if I was, here we go. Here's the standard, what you expect, So no, it's important. So yeah, the very first stage is just sitting and thinking about it. Yeah. And maybe I look stuff up. Maybe I don't. I don't know. It depends on the project. But I've said, sometimes I will just literally sit down and close my eyes, think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe for 15, 20 minutes. And sometimes things present themselves that way. It's kind of amazing. Or you take a walk or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and then you move on to the next phase. And this is where it really gets into the play. So maybe you form these really rough ideas in your head after the visualization part. You're like, okay, now I'm just going to draw. So for my case, being an artist, I'll literally draw it either on paper or graphics tablet, whatever. I've even done it. I did it once on a napkin. I was at a sushi bar and I had this idea and it just kind of came to me. This doesn't always happen. You hear these artists say, oh, it came to me in a flash, Yeah, it doesn't usually do that. But in this case, it did. And I had, there was nothing around. I'm like, okay, I grabbed a paper napkin. I asked the wait person for a pen. And I literally sketched the idea out on a napkin. Because, you got to do that if you get an idea. But generally it doesn't work quite that way. But if you have a visualization session and then you go and what I call the sandbox phase, where you're actually trying to realize some of these ideas. You bring them to life in a visual way. So, and this is a very play-oriented. That's why I call it the sandbox. There's that play imagery in it, because when you think of a kid in a sandbox, they might have a little plastic shovel and a bucket, maybe some water to make a little sandcastle or whatever. I've seen kids like with rocks and they're making this little town, and the nice thing about a sandbox is you can just level it all and start over again too. So it's very free. It's very open.
Now that you mention it, one of the slides that I use to demonstrate and describe play, I think was very much you had sketched a kid in a sandbox. It was like this.
Oh, I think you might be right about that. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Yeah,
yeah, and it's
a very apt metaphor, I think. Yeah, and so there's no wrong ideas in the sandbox.
Yeah,
there might be better one, and that's the whole purpose. Like you start looking for, oh, hey. Or you might see a pattern in everything you're doing, and that pattern will lead to something else.
Yeah.
So, but like you were saying, you should get rid of any ideas of guilt or time wasting when you're doing these early phases, because they are important. They actually are part of the work. It's kind of interesting. They're work and play.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concept that our society really has a hard time with. Because, a lot of us have this Protestant work ethic drilled into us. It's very practical. It's very structured. It's very goal oriented. It's very, quantifiable.
Yeah.
But you really can't do that in this early stage. You can't quantify it because if you do, then you kill it.
Yeah.
You've got to let the ideas take you where they want to go. And then, you start posing more structure. So it starts out very unstructured and it moves towards greater structure. But you never want to lose that little bit of non-structure. I don't know if that's the right word, but you never want to lose that little bit of play.
Yeah.
Even as you go through, so after the sandbox phase, and I've made, let's say it's a CD project like yours. So I've made some sketches. Sometimes they're like digital mock-ups where I've taken, if it's a photo-based design, just kind of put together a quick photo mock-up. And I've discussed it with the customer and refined it a little bit. Like, oh yeah, I like this idea. I like this idea. Then I take it back and I put it through a much more refining phase where I make maybe one or two, okay, we've come up with these 2 really cool ideas. Let's develop them further. Then you got to start putting a little more structure on it. You got to really think about what's appropriate to this and what isn't. So Whereas the first phase, you're like expanding, ideas are flowing out and boom, boom. Now you're kind of reining it in, but you don't want to let it kill it either. This is where it gets really tough. I'm trying to think, like in the case of going back to Ontogeny, I don't have those early designs in front of me, but I imagine, we probably played with typefaces and color and, ways to arrange the collage and that sort of thing till we got something we really like. And even then, there's some play involved. Even in the refining process, there's still some play involved. You want to make sure. And then when you get to the time in the last stage on a design project, it's like making the final high resolution product. So, and that's got a lot of structure, and that's, really businesslike and tedious. You got to make sure the resolution is correct for the printer and the colors balanced and whatever. There's a lot of, nuts and bolts. But if you've got a cool idea and it's moved forward in a way that you like, and even that phase can be fun. You're seeing it come to life. All that play and the openness and everything that you've been kind of gradually funneling into this structure, it starts to, like, you see it come alive. And it's like, if it was good to begin with, if it was a good idea and you were going down the right path, and it's like, oh, wow, now I'm seeing it come alive. It looks amazing. So there can still be fun, even in that phase. Every time you add this element, you're making it a little more refined, but you're going, oh yeah, so yeah, that was a good idea. That looks great. That's what you hope. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's what you hope. So when you get to this, the final phase where you're making the final product, if it has moved forward in the way that you'd like, it will be very satisfying. Now, I imagine somebody who's like, a craftsman or something, like, especially one that they don't follow any kind of template or pattern, like they're making furniture from scratch. At some point, you're going to have to write down measurements. At some point, you're going to have to say, I'm going to cut it here. But if you already know in your mind what that product is, and it's going to look amazing, then even the measuring and the cutting and the measuring twice and all that stuff is going to just be so immensely satisfying, because you're moving towards that original visualization that was really cool. And of course, you hope it turns out that way.
But you give yourself that space in the beginning to have the vision, to allow that vision to have its time to form.
Yes, absolutely. So important.
I think that time aspect of it is often missed. And whether it's about creating something, even in thought. I mean, somebody says, hey, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? The assumption is that we should have a thought formed.
Right. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I don't. It's like, I think you're right. I was talking about, in our society, we want instant answers. But there's just no such thing when it comes to creativity. You can't do that, because then it's not creativity. Creativity is a process. It evolves. It's organic. It has life. And the last thing you want to do is impose something on it that will just drain the life out of it. We all know when we see like something that's like technically excellent, but it's completely dead. We all see that. It's so obvious. There was a movie, I think it was like 20 years ago. Okay, there's that book, The Polar Express. Chris Van Allsburg, one amazing children's illustrator. And his illustrations was pretty realistic, but it was like mind-blowingly good. But, it still had a human touch to it. I mean, when they made the movie adaptation and they did digital animation, they tried way too hard to make it look real. It's like, well, why don't you just use real people then? And people were creeped out by it. People's, the eyes of the characters looked dead, it was very robotic. Even though it was amazing animation, it had absolutely no life. Maybe there's some fans of it out there. I'm not,
Sure.
But that was my take. It's like, you've got to be careful that the process too doesn't, you get so technical and so rigid with your goal that it just drains the life out of it. And then that's a hard thing to do too, because, you do have, I want to make this look amazing, but I got to get it done by this period of time. It's easy to fall back on, maybe more rote or stereotyped ways of doing things, or just getting so into the process that the process itself overwhelms you too. That's another danger.
Yeah.
There are many dangers. There are many pitfalls to the creative process. And so that's why taking a step back every now and then is so important, because it's really easy to start spinning your wheels. I'm sure you know this as a composer, you're dinking around with a tune and it's like, you get obsessed with this one thing and you can't stop. I got to solve this. I got to fix, I do that all the time. I mean, so I have to tell myself, stop, step away, take a walk, maybe have that visualization thing again. That's when it's oftentimes another visualization session is really important. And you get stuck on the detail that it's just not coming out the way you wanted. Then you got to go back and say, okay, that way is not working. I know I'm this far into the process, but this way is just not working. I didn't foresee this. So I've got to think of a new way of looking at it. So that part can come at any point, really, even when you're doing the final product. Sometimes there are things you just didn't realize were going to happen when you start putting it together. It's like, oh, crap. I got to rethink this part. Okay, don't panic and don't obsess over it. Step back, a little visualization. You might go back to the sandbox for a minute, come up with a better solution, and then apply it to the thing you're working on.
I really like that way of moving back and forth through those stages. That like you can pause. Pausing is huge, and then
it's like your pause thing. Yeah, exactly.
The way you describe it, you've kind of your way of doing that is you walk away, and then you maybe literally walk, and
you might literally walk away from it. I do. I mean, I have a flower garden. I go out and water my vegetables. I mean, I have, and of course, I'm lucky. I work at home. I work for myself. I don't have a boss breathing down my neck. I know this is harder for other people, but if there's any way you can just switch tasks, even, when you get stuck, that will help. Like I said, I think we are so linear in this society. We think that the trajectory always has to be forward, but it doesn't. It can be forward. You can take a detour over here. Sometimes you got to go backwards a little bit. As long as you end up where you wanted to go originally, it's fine.
Well, sometimes I would say that you might not arrive where you thought originally.
That's true too. You might but it might be cool. Oh, this is even better than the place I thought I was originally going. So, in creativity, you still kind of let the project speak to you the whole way. The further I go, the more I'm imposing my goals on it. But I can't let that completely dictate what's happening. If I see something that's going on that the project is speaking back to me, like, hey, don't do that, then I got to be sensitive to that too. I got to let it still kind of lead me. It's a dance.
That skill of listening to the project, listening to the course of the thought that was coming to mind as you were talking about kind of your process. You've got this, you've got the reflection and visualization. You go through the sandbox, you go through this refining stage, and then you get into that construction stage, and then you got to move back and forth. But throughout, so the question that was coming to mind was, okay, so how do you know when to move from one to the other? But the answer is the listening.
Yes, oftentimes it is. Yeah. Because you will get to where you have to listen to it. It's sometimes it's screaming at you, like, pay attention. This is not working. Stop what you're doing, and it's pretty obvious, actually. You kind of know when you have to do it. So
I wonder if it's always obvious. Or maybe you tuned into that at a very young age, or I don't know what, but there's I wonder what that, I know what you're talking about. Like, you have to listen to the process as it unfolds. And you can easily squish something by not paying attention, and but maybe that's part of that magical process in creativity.
Yeah, you talked about magic at the very beginning. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, there is some magic to it. I mean, and I think that's what gives all good art life. That X factor, that like, there's something else going. It's more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, like I said, then it's just dead.
Yeah.
It can be technically excellent, but it has no life. Picasso was an excellent realistic. I don't know how people know this about Picasso. When he was really young, he was obviously a genius. His early work, it was very he was brought up, in the tradition of the masters. He could paint anything brilliantly, technically. But that wasn't his interest. Nobody talks about that stuff. No, they talk about when he I'm going to ditch all this. This has no life for me. This is not my vision. I'm going to start doing these other things. And that's when it got interesting.
I wonder, though, was that original part of his process what helped him reach that eventual?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We don't want to just say, okay, so that was all wrong. He shouldn't have. No, I'm sure that helped him to get where he was going. But he listened to himself. I'm, of course, projecting. I don't know what was going through his mind. But, you get to the point you realize what you're doing is just not working. Maybe it's just not working for you.
There's a throwaway comment you made early on about your teacher that had told you don't take pictures of babies, barns, old folk, and one other thing I can't remember.
I'll tell you, babies, barns, dogs, sunsets, something like that.
And you're like, okay, what if I did all of them at once? And
yes, and that's just me being a little kind of sneaky,
But what it is it's also that's the play there. It's the idea of let me test the boundary. Let me see what I can do.
Yes.
Let me push what's here. And,
right.
And to me that sounds like the life. That's or at least part of it, right? That's part of the play in the life. Maybe they're even interchangeable as terms. I don't know.
I think they are. And, and that illustration was funny, he was saying don't, in his mind, he was like, don't think conventionally, this is what everybody does. They impose these rules on themselves, like this is what makes a good photo. But he was imposing another rule.
Yeah.
Even though I thought it was a good one, I was thinking, well, yeah, but that rule could be broken too. And I think in art, that's what you see. You see that especially in the history of music, especially, rock music and popular music. It's like everybody wants to break the rules. And that's cool. That sometimes can bring some really cool results. I think if it's just about that, then you're going to burn out. It's not going to last. It has to be more than about, they did this, so I'm going to go do this. No, I think the most mature art acknowledges the importance of the past, where you've been, like you were talking about Picasso. Yeah, I'm sure that helped him get where he was. You don't want to just say the past if there's no meaning. Because I know in your schema, you have your past self, your future self, your present self. And all of those are important. So your past self, you may have done some work that you hate. And I know I've got my fair share of, ew, cringe. But no, there was something important about that led me to where I am today. So you've got to be forgiving of your past self and understand that was part of the process that brought you where you are. So, and in your future self, you can anticipate more of that. You're going to be doing cooler stuff because you're just using all these accumulated experiences.
In that testing, in that pushing, and that stuff, part of it is it's discovery. It's like what is the ground on which I can stand? What can I trust? Yeah. What rules exist because they make sense to exist, as you pointed out.
Yes.
And once they make sense to you, now they're foundational.
If they don't, then your stuff's going to be dishonest.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with, art that's has a ideological framework draped over it. Now, that's different from saying I have a worldview and that's going to come out in my stuff. That's true of everybody. Everybody has a worldview. Everybody's a little different. But when it's imposed. So there's an artist, Savonarola. No, that was a preacher. Who's the artist? Oh, Botticelli. Venus, the famous, everybody, Adobe Photoshop used it for a while as their splash screen. Venus on the birth of Venus, she's on the shell and there's, her hair is flowing and, there's the angels blowing light on her. And it's a cool painting. I mean, it's very iconic. Well, during that time in Italy, there was this preacher named Savonarola, this priest who was like, no, got to get back to sound doctrine. And, and that applied to everything, including art. He thought, no, it has to be religious art. None of this pagan, Roman stuff. It's got to be the life of the apostles and blah, 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 blah. And so Botticelli started doing these religious paintings and they have no life. Technically, they're great. Yeah. I mean, his skills were good. It's just, it wasn't his vision. And it's so obvious when you look at him. So, yeah, you have to You've got to be true to who you are. And it's important to come up with your own worldview and your own way of thinking about things, because otherwise it is just completely unstructured. And that is not going to go anywhere.
That process of discovery of self is important, that you're kind of figuring it out. And
you got to kind of know who you, I don't want to say know who you are, sort of, but who you're becoming too.
Good,
yeah. Who you've been, who you are now, and who you're becoming. And of course, that last one's even harder because you don't know exactly where you're going, but you can kind of see it. When we all work through ideas, and our ideas about the way things used to be have been challenged, then we start thinking about, okay, so what does that mean, for my future self? Who am I going to become as a result of thinking this way?
Matt, I always enjoy our talks, and we gotta wrap up here. And I'm sure we could just keep going and going. But
I'm sure we could. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I think we just scratched the surface, but yeah.
What if anybody wants to find you? Do you have some way that you want to be found? Or
Yes, my website, which is very outdated, and I'm working on that, but it's newleafdesign.com. You can also just reach me at matt@newleafdesign.com. That's a really good way to get a hold of me. I don't have a big social media presence because I'm an old fuddy-duddy and I just never got into it. Most of my work is word of mouth. So if people are listening and they know you, they can reach out to you too, and you could put them in touch with me. So,
sounds good. Matt, thanks so much. And
hey, great. Yeah, nice talking to you, Kurosh. And I look forward to a lot of future work with you. And like I said, I think we've had an excellent working relationship. And that's one thing. I know we got to go, but real quick, I want to add the idea. Something we didn't touch on is the idea of collaboration. Oh, yeah. And that's really important because, everything I was talking about was like me-centered. But actually collaboration with my customer that's the human part. When I've got to at least entertain their ideas and their thoughts. Even though I'm the design professional, it's going to be their thing. So it's got to reflect them too. So I like you're like the ideal person because you're a creative thinker too. And I think we really just clicked. And so it's a back and forth process of collaboration, and that really can strengthen things too. So to realize that you're just not on an island by yourself, like trying to come up with this great idea, other sources, including the person you're working with, really important.
Absolutely. No, I think that collaboration, the way you've worked with me has been always fantastic.
And I think, we're very collaborative. So we have some of my sessions are sessions with you, talking about stuff and going over ideas and so forth. So,
all right, Matt. Well, have a wonderful. I always have a hard time ending these sort of things. So,
hey, how do you closely? That's always the hardest part. I've been Kurosh, and you've been listening to Rhythms of Focus or Waves of Focus or whatever.
Right.
Anyway,
all right, folks. Well,
so you can have an official sign off. There's your little.
I think.
But it's been great talking to you. And
it has been good talking. And let's just leave it at that as being our wrap up.
We'll leave it at that. Good enough. It's not over. We're just moving to a different session now.
Sounds good. All right.
Take care.
Small note before we close. I've started a new video series on YouTube called Finding Flow with ADHD. It walks through the waves approach of the waves of focus, the wandering mind, the anchor, the visit, and more. It's all brought to life on screen. And if that sounds useful to you, check out the link in the show notes.